Belief in God is not only unnecessary for a universal morality, it is itself a source of moral blindness.
People who sin are going to go to hell, roast forever, that your skin grows again when it peels off.
It would be in the hope either of a reward from Big Brother or for fear of punishment.
Why?
It destroys ethics.
البشر في أغلب تاريخهم كانوا بيتحركوا في مجموعات صغيرة، نقدر نقول أعداد من 20 ل 50 فرد، والرقم ده كان صغير بحيث كل واحد يبقى عارف التاني وعارف هو بيعمل ايه، وده بيخلي كل واحد من 20 ل 50 فرد دول يبقوا حريصين جدا على سمعتهم. لو واحد عمل حاجة غلط مش مقبولة وسط 20 ل 50 فرد التانيين هيتعرف بسرعة، والخبر ده هينتشر بسرعة والكل هيعرف عن ده، وبالتالي الناس هتبتدي ما تثقش فيه زي زمان. ولكن المشكلة ان لو عدد المجموعة بقى اكبر واكبر، قدرتنا ان احنا نعرف اللي حوالينا ونعرف هم بيعملوا ايه بتقل وبتقل، والناس اللي حواليك دول بيتحولوا لناس غريبة عنك ما تعرفش عنهم حاجة، وده معناه ان هم ممكن يعملوا حاجة غلط، ممكن يعملوا حاجة مش مقبولة وسط الجماعة بتاعتهم بدون ما يدفعوا ثمن الضرر بسمعتهم، وهو محدش شايفهم. وبدون حل للمشكلة دي المجموعات الكبيرة ما بتقدرش تكمل، وهو كل واحد هيجري ورا مصلحته وهيحاول يفري رايد. والمقصود بالكلمة دي ان الشخص يستفيد من المجتمع اللي حواليه بدون ما يقدم اللي عليه، محدش شايفه ومحدش متابعه، والنتيجة ان المجموعات البشرية كان صعب انها تكبر في حجمها. اغلب جماعات الصيد والجمع اللي لقيناها ما كانش بيتعدى تعدادها 150 واحد بالكتير، ولكن في اخر 12,000 سنة بدأ البشر في انهم يتجمعوا في مجموعات حجمها اكبر واكبر من كده. وده بيطرح السؤال، ايه اللي اتغير؟ ايه اللي سمح لينا ان احنا نتعاون بشكل اكبر يخلينا نكسر الحاجز ده؟ من الاجابات المطروحة للرد على السؤال ده هي الدين، وبالذات جانب العقاب الماورائي اللي ممكن يكون رادع للي بيحاول يفري رايد ويشجع على تعاون كافي وسط المجموعات الأكبر. تحت مراقبة كيان ماورائي، الناس اللي كان ممكن يجي في بالهم انهم يقدروا يعملوا حاجة غلط بدون ما يتشافوا بطلوا يفكروا كده، وبدل ما يبقوا خايفين على سمعتهم وسط الناس بقوا خايفين على سمعتهم كمان قدام الإله، وده بيقلل من فرص ان هم يغشوا او يفري رايدوا. لو الفرضية دي صحيحة فمفروض ان الناس تبقى اكثر اتباعا للصح واكثر بعدا من الغلط وسط مجموعتهم لو فكرناهم بربنا. في الجزء ده من الفيديو هعرض بعض الدراسات اللي حاولت تختبر الفرضية دي عشان نشوف هي صح ولا غلط. الدراسات دي ليها كذا نوع. هنبدأ بالدراسات بتاعة التهيئة، البرايمينج. التهيئة في التجارب دي بتكون ان العالم بيحاول يشد انتباه الناس بطريقة غير مباشرة لفكرة الإله، وهيبقى في مجموعة تانية الكنترول مش هيتم تهيئتهم بالفكرة دي وهتتم المقارنة. أول دراسة هتكون لعزيم شريف وأرا نورنزيان، الاتنين من Department of Psychology جامعة بريتش كولومبيا كندا.
Tried to subtly draw the attention of the people to the concept of God. And in the other group, we just left them relatively undisturbed. They were the control condition. So then we took these two groups, the control condition and the God-primed group, and had them play a game borrowed from experimental economics, the dictator game. And what it does is it gives one subject an allotment of money. In our study, that was 10 Canadian dollars. And it gives another subject nothing. But the first subject, who's called the dictator, has the opportunity to share some of what's been allotted to him or her with the other participant, and they can do so in any denomination that they want. So the dictator can do the equitable thing. Since these were two people who ended up in the same situation just randomly, one got $10 and the other didn't, the dictator could just split it 50-50, both walk away with $5. Or the dictator could be more selfish and could keep, say, $9 for themselves and give just $1 to the non-dictator, the recipient. Or the dictator could do what most people do in this experiment, which is just keep all $10 for themselves and give nothing to the other participant. Now, in this variant of the dictator game, these two participants were kept anonymous from each other, and their decision, the dictator's decision, was kept confidential from the experimenters. As a result, the dictator faced no reputational costs for being selfish in this case, or at least they faced no earthly reputational costs. The idea was that the group that had been primed with God would now be more concerned about their reputation, not just with humans, but also with God themselves. And as a result, that would compel them to be more generous in this otherwise anonymous situation. So what did people do? Well, in the control condition, they did what people in control conditions in dictator games typically do. The modal response, that is the response that the plurality of people did, was that they kept all the money for themselves. All the dictators kept all $10 for themselves. And the average amount that the dictators gave to the recipient was about 2 of the $10. But in that group who'd been primed with God, in that group who'd been subtly led to think about God concepts before they made this decision, the modal response now shifted to that equitable $5. That is, more participants split the money 50-50 than chose any other option. And the average amount that was given was over $4. So this is consistent with what we'd hypothesized. When people think about God, it shifts their behavior to being more moral. So since that study, a number of other studies have used that same basic paradigm to show that when people are primed with God, when they're subtly led to think about God, they also become more cooperative and they become less likely to cheat, they become more charitable, and they become more willing to volunteer. All things that would be to the benefit of the group, even if they're costly to the individual.
بعد الدراسة دي حاول كتير من العلماء تكرار نفس التجربة بطرق مختلفة علشان نتأكد إن النتيجة فعلا بتعبر عن حقيقة ونقلل عامل الخطأ. وفي 2015 تم نشر الميتا أناليسيس اللي بتجمع بيانات أكتر من 90 دراسة وبتحللهم. دكتور جوزيف هنريتش رئيس قسم الأحياء التطورية في جامعة هارفارد هو اللي هيكلمنا عن النتائج.
Okay, so there seems to be good evidence, given the current database of studies, that religious primes do cause believers to behave more pro-socially, and they've done this in fairness games like the dictator game, which is the one I talked about, in cooperation games and in cheating tasks. And so it reduces cheating, increases cooperation, and increases equitable distributions in the dictator game.
عايزين ناخد بعد كده التجربة دي لأرض الواقع بره المعمل، نشوف على الأرض هل فعلا التهيئة دي إن احنا نفكر الناس بربنا يخليهم فعلا أخلاقيين أكتر، متعاونين أكتر. أعتقد إن أي حد عايش في مجتمع مسلم هيبقى عارف إن أكتر إشارة ملحوظة بناخد بالنا منها دايما بتفكرنا بربنا في المجتمعات الإسلامية ما بتكونش المآذن اللي بنشوفها في كل حتة في الشوارع أو من بلكونات بيوتنا، ولكن بتكون الأذان.
There have been at least a couple of research groups who've used that naturally occurring religious prime of the call to prayer to see if it affects moral behavior. In one of these, a PhD student named Eric Duhaime went to Morocco and played a variant of that dictator game with Moroccan shopkeepers. And he noted which games were playing when the call to prayer was going off and compared those to the games played when it wasn't. Now, the Moroccan shopkeepers were pretty generous overall, but when the call to prayer was going off while they were playing the game, every single one of those Moroccan shopkeepers gave the maximum amount that they could in the dictator game, keeping actually nothing for themselves.
ريتشارد داكنز وكريستوفر هيتشنز في بداية الفيديو كانوا بيلوموا على الدين فكرة الإله شديد العقاب، وده هيبقى موضوع الفيديو اللي جاي. هل الإيمان بإله شديد العقاب فعلا بالسوء اللي اتكلموا عنه؟
Fertility link is extremely important because what's happening is that when societies secularize, however they do it, inevitably fertility rates decline dramatically. These countries can't even reproduce at replacement level. Right. If it weren't for immigration, they would be shrinking. That's what's happening in Northern Europe. Israel, for example, we have this interesting shift. Israel used to be overwhelmingly secular, and now it's shifted towards being predominantly religious. That's mainly because the Orthodox and the ultra-Orthodox are expanding in numbers, mainly because of fertility rates.